I remember one time I was working on repositioning this Australian company, and the CEO, who had been on board with kind of everything we were talking about, was suddenly scared. Like, didn't want to do the big thing we'd all agreed we were going to do the day before.
I think something we notice as well is you have a lot of people that talk to customers, but they don't especially ask sometimes the right questions, or they ask the question in the way that you're actually guiding an answer that you want to get out of it.
Everyone's trying to sound like the smartest person in the room. And we use these big words that don't really mean anything. And we're not really touching at the heart of the matter or the truth of the problems we're solving.
How would you go for companies who have threefold value proposition? Would you tell them, okay, communicate the four of them or focus on one? So, welcome, Emma.
Thank
you very much for being here. You're the founder of Punchy, and you also wrote the book, Make It Punchy, for people to see it. So first of all, can you tell me a bit more about yourself? What is your background story? Go as far as you want.
Oh gosh, well, I could go back to the beginning of the time. I was born a writer and one of those people that just came out wanting to write.
Yeah.
And I followed that career through many things. I did journalism. I was a travel writer. I wrote about concerts. And I eventually got into consumer branding and wrote copy for like European goods like toilet paper and Axe deodorant and things like that. And then I moved to the United States and I started working for a B2B marketing agency randomly. And I was like, oh, I'm sure this will be just like B2C. And my first client was an enterprise tech client. And I was like, what the heck is this? I was reading their messaging. I was like, this is crazy. I don't understand any of this. Do people understand this? And the CMos, no, people don't understand this. We have a really hard time with our messaging.
Okay.
So I helped them by using a lot of things I had learned in consumer, making it humane, making it simple, connecting with people, and it really helped them. So I became obsessed. And I was like, I think this is my mission in life. So I eventually went out on my own and said, I am just going to help tech companies and startups get clear on their message and help people understand what it is they're selling. And so I've been following that. And since 2016, Punchy, now we develop messaging for all kinds of companies. We also train marketing teams of tech companies how to write messaging. So it's been a long journey, but yeah, I'm pretty mission driven about making tech a bit more human.
Nice. Super nice. Thanks for the introduction. Super clear.
Yeah.
I think the first real question is, so what is the process that you have for creating clear positioning and messaging?
Yeah. First thing I do is when I work with clients is I get a cross-functional team together. The more I do this, the more I realize what I'm actually doing is getting people to align and agree. Yep. I think that's what's actually really hard about positioning and messaging, because I think people have different ideas and then sometimes people do their own thing and it's not the same. So I get a cross-functional team together, representatives from different departments, and I aim to get 3 perspectives. I try to understand their internal perspective, what they think makes them great, different, etc. I look at their competitive set, get a really good understanding what's in the market, and where is their place, where's the opportunity, and then I speak to their customers and understand what do their customers care about, how do they talk about, magic up those 3 things together, and then I take the cross-functional team through a series of working sessions where we figure out by the end of it, where should we play? Right? We address those questions that need to be addressed. And by the end of it, we're all agreed on high level, what's our position, what's our unique value. And then I go into messaging development once we've already reached that alignment.
Nice.
And it's been a very successful way to get people from a fast moving company to agree on something meaningful quite quickly. So I'm pretty proud of it. It was born out of working with tech companies who were like moving a million miles.
So I have a follow-up question actually on this, because when we work with clients, we do ICP positioning messaging with our strategy part.
Yeah.
And I realized that with some clients, especially when you do the positioning and the messaging, you often have, I would say, I guess maybe a CEO that has a strong opinion about this should be the way it is. And often you see other stakeholders in the company that don't agree with it because they're, I would say, maybe a bit closer to customers or like they do more research, but they can't manage to convince the CEO about, all right, this is actually not how we should position. How do you manage the stakeholders? Where's the stakeholder management here when you have this kind of dynamics?
Yeah. That's the beauty of being the third party expert. So I can come in and say something that maybe other colleagues or stakeholders don't feel comfortable. I remember one time I was working on repositioning this Australian company, and the CEO, who had been on board with kind of everything we were talking about, was suddenly scared. Like, didn't want to do the big thing we'd all agreed we were going to do the day before. And I could tell it was because he'd been having a bunch of meetings with VCs, and he was just starting to freak out a little. And he was just about to throw in the towel, and I could tell it's because he was scared.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, what's going to make him feel less scared? And there was the CRO. So the CEO was like, I'm afraid of this new position is going to alienate our existing customer base. I was like, great, makes sense. Turned to a CRO, and I was like, is that true?
Yeah.
Do you think this is going to alienate existing customers? He's no. He's just not going to change anything about the existing people coming to us, but it's going to allow us to go into these stories at a higher altitude and welcome in new audiences. No, there's no worry about this. And the CEO's like, all right. And so I could see underneath what was actually happening below the feedback.
Yeah.
And I think that is something I'm good at. And that is something I address. And I think fear drives a lot of things, right? It drives a lot of messaging
100%.
decisions. People are making decisions out of fear rather than, hey, let's have faith in what makes us good. Let's have faith in our product that it solves problems really well. I'm not afraid to like get in there and address what needs to be addressed.
Okay, no, really cool. Obviously, you work with a lot of different companies. What common mistakes do you see companies make when it comes to messaging? Do you have top 1, 2, 3, whatever things that you're like, okay, if companies don't do that, then they will be way better with the message?
Yeah, I think the most common thing that most companies do is either they're too technical, right? They're just talking about themselves and explaining their technology and making it very complicated and no one really cares.
Yeah.
Or sometimes companies go way on the other side of the spectrum. And so really high level value statements like increase revenue, grow your business, which also don't say a lot to people. And so I see people doing one or the other when really they should be somewhere in the middle.
Yep.
So that's the thing that I see happening the most. I think the other thing is probably not really understanding their customers enough.
Yeah, very good.
So maybe going off of what you think they think. And that always surprises me when I come across like a marketing team that doesn't really talk to the customer.
Yeah.
Because it's such a easy, fast way to get better messaging. Just talk to them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think something we notice as well is you have a lot of people that talk to customers, but they don't especially ask sometimes the right questions.
Yes.
Or they ask the question in the way that you're actually guiding an answer that you want to get out of it.
Right.
So I think there's a smart way about asking the questions to make sure the answer is relevant.
Yes.
But yeah, really cool one.
Yes.
Okay, let's transition maybe to your book. So make it punchy. Okay, so you wrote this book. Tell us more about the book and why actually people should read it.
Yeah, so for years, I think I was maybe one of the earlier proponents of messaging. When I started my business in 2016, I said, I'm just going to build a consultancy that just does messaging for tech companies. And people were like, that's a terrible idea. We can't just have a company that just does that. People don't value it, etc. But I saw the problem. So I did it anyway. And as the discussion, I think, with messaging has become bigger, people have asked, is there a good book? Can you recommend a book? It's like, there is no book on messaging. There are copywriting books, there's storytelling books, and they're great. But there is not one that I can point people to how to do messaging for tech companies. I was like, maybe I should write one. And I was thinking about maybe looking for a publisher. And I met April Dunford for the first time. We'd been on a podcast. We clicked. So we had a call just to get to know each other. And I asked her, how did you publish your book? I assumed she went with a large publisher. And she said, oh, I use this great publisher. And she's, you should write the book on messaging. And I was like, you know what? When April Dunford gives you some advice like that,
let's do it.
Let's do it. So I went straight to that publisher. Within a month, I was ready to start writing the book because I just saw a need for it. There isn't a book like that. So that's why I did it, just to give people a resource because so many people ask.
So you find first the publisher and then you wrote the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That's the way to go.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And so tell us a bit more about the book. So what do you cover in the book?
Yeah.
What are like the key takeaways, let's put it this way, or the feed structure?
Yeah, I wanted to give people a step-by-step process they could follow. and get a good result.
Yeah.
So I've been training teams for the last 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So this has actually been tested because you don't know if your ideas are going to work, but they have been working for people. So it really reflects my own process, how I go from figuring out who your customer is to really understanding their pains and their needs, to connecting that to your product's unique qualities, to honing in on one thing, etc. It goes into the strategy, and then how do you actually write it? And then what do you do with your messaging once you've finished it? So it's that whole kind of arc.
Full process.
And there's a lot on strategy because I believe that messaging is half strategy, half writing. And a lot of people skip over the strategy part, go straight to the words. And there's actually quite a few chapters where I'm still talking about strategy. And I say, we're not going to write yet because you need to figure these things out.
Of course.
So that's what the book's about. And what I hope people take away is I want them to just feel like they can actually do this. I think some people feel like daunted or they feel like they're not good at it.
Yeah.
And I want people to read this and think, yeah, I can do this. Because in my training courses, a lot of marketers say, well, I'm not that good or I want to get better. And everyone has been good. I've trained over 1,000 marketers. No one has been bad.
Okay.
No one has been bad.
Yeah.
No one has been bad. Everyone has been good. And I think we're really hard on ourselves. So I hope people read this and think, you know what? I can write great messages.
Perfect. Super nice. I think it's really important as well that you give structure on how to do it. Because I think that's the problem a lot of marketers have. Like, I know what good messaging should look like. I just don't know exactly how to get there.
Yeah.
So I think this is one of the books that can really help people to structure their thoughts and actually apply it to the company.
Yes, I really hope so.
Perfect. I'm going to read that one so I don't get it wrong. So in the book, you talk about crafting messages that resonate quickly, right? So how do you balance brevity with depth to make sure that it remains meaningful?
Yeah. So I believe you should use only as many words as you need to convey an idea. So a lot of times people think that they can only use 6 words. I think there is a perception that you have to keep your message to 6 or 7 words or else it's too long. If you do that, it's going to be really one of those generic phrases that means nothing, like drive operational efficiency. So something.
Grow your revenue.
Grow your revenue because you're trying to say a lot of things in just 7 words. What I preach in this book is get really clear on what is the idea. What is the single most important takeaway you want in this message? And then be specific. Add concrete detail so people know what you're talking about. Don't use these abstract phrases. And that brings clarity. And you know what? That message might be 15 words or 16 words. But if it effectively conveys one clear idea successfully, it is much better than a 7-word vague statement. So I say, go wide, get concrete and specific, focus on one idea. And then if you're happy with it, you can probably edit it down and shave off a few words to make it shorter if you need. But start with the big idea and then, pare back the words.
Yeah.
And that's easier.
Okay, makes sense. Now, how would you go for companies who have, let's say, 3 full value proposition and they're not 100% sure? They're like, okay, maybe this one is the main one. But like, how do you make sure that if they want to communicate, let's say 4 ideas, would you tell them, okay, communicate the 4 of them or focus on one? What's the idea here?
Focus on one. I even have a section in the book where I say, eventually you have to just choose one thing.
Yeah.
So I think in the highest level, the value proposition needs to be one thing. It's your hook.
Yeah.
It's the introduction. It's not the only opportunity you're going to have to talk to people and share things, but you need to go in with one idea. If you throw 4 things at them, people won't remember any of them. Go in with one idea, knowing that you can introduce other ideas later.
Okay. What is an advice that you would give to founders or CMO that are not sure about the messaging and they know they want to improve it? What would be an advice about how to get started with this?
Talk to customers. You can talk to a customer and you can find out what they think about your current messaging.
Yeah.
If you are not sure, you think something's off, but you don't know why, they'll tell you that. You can also ask them those right questions about their problems, what motivates them, how they want things to change, how they would describe the product's value, all that. Record it and lift their language. They will likely use really nice language. They'll say it really simple and let that drive your messaging. And you can feel good about that because it comes from your customer. So
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Maybe one question back, because I think positioning messaging comes after the fact of identifying that you have a clear ICP, right?
Yeah.
Because you can ask all those questions, but if you actually don't ask it to the right audience, you might end up building the wrong product or not the right. So do you also, when you join a company, do you also challenge them maybe on the ICP, the ideal customers? Because some of them are like, no, I have those 6, 7 ideal clients, which is not the case. Often you have 1 or 2. Do you like look first at this high level before you dive into positioning? And
I do. Messaging? These days, I work with later stage companies on messaging. So it's very much more about messaging than positioning. But a couple of years ago, I was very much working with like Series A, B, where, I was forcing them to position more tighter.
Yeah.
So they would say, oh, we've got like all these customers. So in my book, I call it the A+ customer. And so I was working with a company and they have a bunch of customers. And some are A+ customers, but some are D- customers, right? They've grown about paying. They want a discount. They're not using all the great features, right? So I help them see, there are these people here that actually, they see so much value in your product, they would pay more for it. These people over here, they want to pay less for the same thing. Let's go for these people and let's raise our price. And I think when people can make that connection where perceived value matters, they were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And for the people who are afraid to narrow in on one customer because they think they're leaving out the others, what this company found was they ended up focusing more on like private equity backed, fast moving companies. And they were cooler than the kind of big, old, stodgy multinationals that they were the D- customers. But when they focused on this customer, because there's like a cool vibe around their message, all the aspiring multinationals who wanted to be like that, they were attracted with that message too.
Yeah.
So it does work. So I think when you ask people to take a good, hard look at their customers, because they're the ones that are pains in the ass.
Exactly. We all know that, They
know them, and it's like, do you want more of them? Or do you want some of the nice one who doesn't give you hassle, who's happy to renew every year? And I think if you put it in those terms, they're like, oh yeah, you want more of them?
That's a really good way to put it. I really like that. Okay, I think the last question, and then we can move on. It's, what is one controversial opinion that you have could be about messaging, business, marketing in general?
I've got one. I think B2B messaging is too sanitized and safe.
Okay.
I think we are always trying to put this like really professional, everyone's trying to sound like the smartest person in the room. And we use these big words that don't really mean anything. And we're not really touching at the heart of the matter or the truth of the problems we're solving. It's a missed opportunity. And I think everyone's doing it because we're copying everyone else and we feel safe if we all do the same things. But I think they have to be real with customers. And when you can be real and really talk about the problems they're feeling in a real way, you're going to stand out and you're going to resonate. For example, I was working with a company and I was training them and they were like a customer data platform. And I was like, oh, what's the problem your product's solving? And they're like, oh, it helps with like departmental alignment. I'm like, can you tell me what that really means? I said, who's the audience? And they said, oh, head of customer experience. I said, what do you actually mean? And they're like, oh, they've got all these different departments that they're in charge of. And each department has their own data. And everyone's chasing their own metrics and they're different. And they don't add up to a clear picture. And it's really fucking stuff up for the head of experience. And he just wishes everyone was on the same page. And I was like, that is what you should be talking about in your messaging, not enhance departmental alignment. No one's getting excited about that. But we changed the message to finally get everyone chasing the same metric. And that is so much more immediate and it grabs people and it really resonates with people who are experiencing that problem. So I feel like we just have to get more real in B2B.
Nice. Really good one. To finish, is there something you would like to share, to promote, whatever, go for it.
Just the book. I'm making Punchy. I feel really passionate about it. I wrote it with the intent to answer every question I've been asked over the years. And I like to think that I've at least had a good shot at answering most questions. If you're even vaguely interested in it, if you have a colleague who you wish was better at messaging, maybe gift it to them. Give it to your CEO so they can see what good messaging looks like. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Emma.
Thank you for having me. It was so fun.
My pleasure.